Hi, everyone. We're going to start in just another minute. All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Mariah O'Crongley. I am one of the program directors at Bedford 2030, an environmental nonprofit focused on helping the town of Bedford reach their aggressive climate goals in greenhouse gas emission reduction. And we're here tonight to talk to three experts in various capacities about their electric vehicle experience, knowledge, and know-how. And I also just want to give a shout out to New Yorkers for Clean Power for co-sponsoring the event with us and sharing Samrat, one of their coaches, and also for the North Salem Climate Action Committee for also co-sponsoring the event. And we'll kick it off with a couple of introductions of each of the coaches. So we'll start with Tristan, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your expertise.
Yeah, of course. Thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Tristan Prochnow. I am the National Fleet Account Manager here at Chargepoint. I've been working at Chargepoint for just a little bit over 2 years now, but I've been an EV enthusiast since as long as I can remember, really, probably around 2010, 2012, when the first vehicle started coming out. So I look forward to talking to everybody.
Thank you. And Samrat?
Hi, everyone. I'm Samrat. I'm one of the energy coaches with New Yorkers for Clean Power, but that's not my job. I'm a high school teacher. I teach physics, mathematics, and computer science at Walkill High School. And I have a background in engineering and fell in love with electric cars for many reasons, but primarily the emission savings in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and curtailment of air pollution. So I'm excited that we'll get to talk about that today.
And last but not least, Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Braun, and I'm a community member. I live in Katona. We've lived here for about 17 years. I'm a retired pediatrician. My husband and I have 2 kids in college. We bought our first EV about 5 years ago in 2018. And then a couple years ago, we bought a plug-in hybrid EV, a Toyota Prius Prime. So we've been plugging in 2 cars now for a few years and love the experience of the convenience of just plugging in and being ready to go anywhere in the morning. Love how fun it is to drive EVs, how much acceleration they have. They're very zippy, super easy. And of course, I love the environmental benefits too, and keeping our air clean for everyone's health.
Awesome. So we'll run through a list of questions that the coaches have prepped answers for, and then we'll also have a question and answer period at the end, but feel free to also type in questions into the Q&A box, and we'll either answer them as they come up or at the end, pending how the conversation is flowing. And let's kick it off. Our first question is, how should I go about picking out which electric car to get? Samrat, I'm not sure if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So I'll quickly hit upon a few things. I think electric cars are a very personal thing, just like cars in general, but it's about understanding how do you use a car on a day-to-day basis. And this is not just about the space of the car, which is what people usually look at, but where do you drive? How often do you drive there, right? So there's a little bit of work to be done there. They're primarily, like Cynthia said, you have two options. You can get an all-electric car, or you can get a plug-in hybrid, which can have anywhere from 30 to about 45 miles of all-electric driving for most models, and then you have a gasoline vehicle. But the key thing is actually understanding how do you use a car and buying just enough car, because most surveys shows that Americans buy more car than they need, because they always do this, like, but what about that? Once every 5 years, I put 2 elephants into my car, so I need to have a big SUV. Like, maybe you can rent an SUV for that, right? So that's my quick take on it. I would also say, at New Yorkers for Clean Power, we have a coaching program that's freely available to the public. I have to put that plug in. Please make an appointment with one of the coaches, and we can work with you to understand which car might be best for you.
Cynthia, how did you pick your EV and plug-in?
Well, we really went through most of the main decisions you would go through picking any car, which is, what size car we felt we needed, what we needed all-wheel drive for a long, steep driveway in New York. At the time, 5 years ago, because we wanted we did want a spacious sort of SUV for kids and kids' friends and family trips and things like that. So at the time, our options were limited because there was really only one SUV with all-wheel drive, and that was a Tesla Model X. And so we ended up buying that one in 2018. Now there are many more options as far as, larger SUV EVs, as well as with all-wheel drive. But at that time, that kind of guided our decision. And then EV specific is how big a battery do you think you want or need, and how are you going to charge your car? So for us, we had 3 options for battery sizes. And because we were on a budget, we picked the smallest one, so we could spend, the least amount of money to get into that EV. And that's a battery for us of 220 miles capacity, which is more than enough for almost everything I do and everything I need. So it's worked out great, but there are larger batteries out there. And then charging, I had to think ahead a little bit about how I was going to charge. And, that's relatively, if you're going to go with an EV versus a plug-in hybrid, it maybe makes a little bit of a difference of how you think you're going to set up your charging. For us, we set up charging at home in our garage. We installed a level 2 charger. So that just makes charging super easy.
Speaking of charging, Tristan, can you talk a little bit about the different types of chargers? Level 1, level 2, level 3?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. And I actually have a nice image here I wanted to share. So let me pull up my screen. All right. Perfect. So let me know when you can see it.
Yep.
Awesome. So this slide that I have prepared, and this is something that I tend to share with customers as well. It runs you through the levels 1, 2, and 3, right? So level 1, that's going to be your standard home outlet, essentially, is what you're plugging into. It's going to be what you would call a trickle charge. It's going to be very slow. Not ideal, but if you have a lot of time, like something like overnight, you can recruit maybe 10, 15 miles. So level 1, not ideal. Level 2, so that's what we were talking about with that home charger. So that's what you would get installed ideally at your home when you purchase an EV. That's going to net you, 25 plus miles per hour of range. And level 3, that's when you're getting into the DC fast chargers. So that's what you're going to see on the public highway corridors, charging large fleet vehicles. It really depends on the output of those. They can be anywhere from I've seen 30 kilowatt fast chargers all the way up to 400 kilowatt. So, and a nice little function I use for that to calculate the range per hour. Generally, you can expect 3.5 miles of range per kilowatt output. So, if you're looking at a 6 kilowatt station, multiply 6 by 3.5, and you'll get your 22 miles an hour charging. So that helps you kind of get an idea of what to expect when you come to a level 2 or level 3 fast charger. Level 1's not common to see out in the wild. That's more so, Maybe you're staying at an Airbnb and you want to get a quick charge or something like that, you can plug into their outlet, and that's where you get that level 1 charge. But yeah, that's my level 1, 2, and 3 there.
And then what are the
Stop sharing.
different types of charging connectors?
Perfect, yeah. So I actually have one more slide for that as well. So this slide here is just outlining the different connector types. J1772 being the most common outside of Tesla. Tesla using the NACS, North American Charging Standard, seen down here in the bottom right corner. Lots of you guys, if you're following the news, you're seeing more and more automakers committing themselves to NACS. What that's going to look like in the future, we don't know yet. There's a lot of rumors going around that cars are going to have J1772 and NACS and having multiple plugs on each side. It's an exciting development there. You also have CCS, so that is for DC fast charging. So again, that's what you're going to see on the non-Tesla vehicles at the moment. And then CHAdeMO, more of an older connector. This one was primarily used by older Nissan Leaf models. It's being phased out ultimately, so won't have to worry too much about the CHAdeMO. So J1772 for that level 2 and level 1 charging, and then CCS and NACS for that level 3.
Thank you. Cynthia, for your Tesla, how do you handle charging when you're on the road?
So if we're going on a road trip, we just stop at the superchargers typically. We can put our destination into the Navi system on this, and the screen will show us our route, and it'll show us all of the superchargers along the route. It'll tell us which ones it thinks we should stop at to charge, because we'll be getting low on our battery. Maybe we're down to 30 or 40 miles, and that's a good time to kind of pull over and stop and charge. So that's how we do it with road trips. We've gone up to Maine, we've gone to all kind of up and down to kind of the eastern seaboard with our car, and have found it to be pretty easy to do. It probably takes 20 or 30 minutes to stop at the supercharger and get out, have a cup of coffee, walk the dog, stretch our legs. It slows your travel down a little. You kind of have to plan ahead and think where you're going and look ahead. But we've found that the network of chargers is very strong in our area. And for the most part, we really haven't had any trouble getting to superchargers when needed. And we're told also in real time how many stalls are available at each supercharger. And if there's a wait, knock on wood, we've never had a wait, and knock on wood, we've never run out of battery power. So, it's pretty good at predicting. The model in the Tesla is pretty good at predicting when you need to stop and charge, and it will tell you where to go.
And just to note, so that's specifically for Tesla. For non-Tesla folks, I shared a link to the PlugShare app that Samrat recommends, which I've an EV myself, is super useful to find the charging networks, including Chargepoint chargers.
And Maria, I just quickly wanted to add that we have a Tesla in the family, and we have a Nissan Leaf, which is an older car, and Tristan was saying, the CHAdeMO is not being promoted that much. And yet what we found is, given where we live here in the Northeast, the density of chargers is really increasing in a way that's made traveling along the corridor very convenient. My partner takes this Leaf, which only has a 150-mile range. It's an all-electric compared to the Tesla, and still she takes it for a 3-hour trip to her parents in Pennsylvania, because now they have charging stations and they keep growing. So I think we specifically here live in a place where the charger density is quite impressive, and it keeps growing because of networks like ChargePoint.
Yeah, and coming from the commercial side, just to add, the New York area specifically, that and California are the largest markets with the highest coverage of EV charging. So that's something to feel confident about as well when you consider transitioning to an EV. One more thing I just want to touch on, adapters, very common. So, if you drive a Tesla, you can't find a supercharger, there are adapters available.
Mm-hmm.
And, as Tesla opens up, vice versa is going to be true. So,
right.
Thank you. Samrat, do you want to comment on incentives for buying an EV?
Sure. So The incentives have changed a little bit in 2024. So new EVs, the ones that qualify, and I'll put all of these links in the chat in a moment. EVs that qualify, one can get up to 7,500. It's a non-refundable tax credit. But now it's also a point of sale credit, which means if the dealership has signed up with the IRS, you have to confirm with them, then they can take it. It can become a point of sale rebate as well, and you don't need to have a tax liability for that. So like you may have zero tax liability, but if the dealership that you're buying from has signed up with the IRS for the EV tax credits, then they can pass on that 7,500 savings if the car qualifies. So if you want to look at the cars that qualify, this is the link. I'm going to put it here. This is going to keep changing because in the Inflation Reduction Act, there are different requirements for cars, which has to do with North American assembly, battery component requirements, and mineral requirements, and they're all shifting. So please keep checking this link that I put in the chat. And also the requirements for the new EV credit, there are income limits. Most people should qualify for it. If you make more than this money, then you shouldn't have to worry about EV tax credit. The limits are very generous. But more like what I'm most excited about is the fact that now we have tax credits for used EVs. Now this started in 2023, but again, it's also can also be a point of sale. The same thing I described for the new EV, up to $4,000 for an electric car. That's less than $25,000 in cost. So a lot of used EVs are below $25,000. I've had a few friends, including one of our coaches at New Yorkers for Clean Power, buy a used EV. Really exciting. I'm more excited about the used EV tax credit because I think it's going to help those families traditionally not been able to take advantage of the tax credit because they don't make enough money. So we are in a good place. The number of cars that have qualified have gone down in 2024, but I think auto manufacturers are going to adjust to bring the number up. Additionally, if you lease a car, then whatever I said is like none of these requirements, etc., matters. The auto manufacturer should be able to pass on the incentive to you in the cost of the lease. So for those people who like leasing, the incentives can be built into the cost of the lease.
Are there any New York State specific incentives?
Yes, sorry, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, state incentives, New York State gives up to $2,000. There are differences in terms of how big the battery is, what is the cost of the car, etc. I'll put it in the chat. So New York State also gives up to $2,000. That's so like if you let's take an example, right? Look at a low priced car, say like a Chevy Bolt, right? And now Chevy Bolts are hard to find. Chevy's not really making them anymore, but there's still ones that you can find on the lots, right? So if you get a Chevy Bolt EUV and you can find it on a lot, you can get that car with lots of nice features for about 31K, like on average, right? And that has all the good standard safety features, comfort features, everything. 2,000 by New York State, 7,500 by the feds. Take 9,500 off that price. You're talking about a new electric car that has over 250 miles of range, huge warranties. For what? For 21,500? That's an absolute steal. That could, with such low maintenance, and maybe we'll talk about that later. We are in a very good place in terms of if you are ready to switch to an EV and you can find one. It's hard to find them because they're so good and the incentives can be really good. Then this is the time to switch. I highly recommend that.
Awesome, thank you. In terms of saving, one more financial thing, home charging. Are there rebates for home charging, installing level 2 chargers,
Yeah. Tristan, do you want to talk about that? Do you know about that? Because I'm happy to talk about it.
I know it's pretty fluid. The incentives, the rebates, right? They're kind of changing all the time, but we're going to see over time that these things are becoming more common, whether it's provided by the state, the utility,
right.
etc.
I think it's right. I think it's about up to 1,000 right now. Maria, like I don't remember the exact figure, but the feds do give an EV charger tax credit. Now, I do want to say, folks, that in many situations, you don't need an EV charger at home. What I mean by that is the cars come with their chargers. So it's just like a mobile phone has a charger, the car comes with its charger. What you need is an outlet at home in most cases. And that outlet, like Cynthia was saying, that's a level 2, which is a 240-volt outlet. So that think of a dryer outlet. That's essentially what you need. So you need an electrician who can do the work for you to put that outlet in, and that's about it. So that can be just a few $100s. It doesn't have to be $1,000. You don't have to buy the whole setup. And that money that you spend for doing the electrical work does qualify for a tax credit.
There are also utility rebates for charger installation and also for time of use if you charge your car during off-peak times. So I'm popping in the chat also some information about NYSEG's program. And if you have any questions about any of these items and questions, you can always email us and we're happy to dive deeper into any of that. I did also want to touch on not home charging. Oh my gosh. Oh, range anxiety. Samrat, could you talk a little bit about range anxiety and your experience? And then also Cynthia, if you have any comments as an owner and someone who takes some car trips in their EV.
So I mean, the reason I got a Tesla was, and this was in 2019, I have the lowest priced and the lowest range Tesla, which is about 250 miles, right? But given their network, I've never had range anxiety. And I think Cynthia would probably have a similar experience. To go to Montreal, the first week I bought it, I went to Rochester in a snowstorm. The other cars, there's a little more planning required, but like I said before, these are problems that are getting solved very rapidly. I would just say the anxiety usually comes up because the anxiety is coming from our social media feeds. We listen too often to people who actually don't drive electric cars. So what I would say is, if you have range anxiety, talk to a few people who have electric cars, and then you'll find that it's actually not that big a deal. And I'm not asking people to make sacrifices and stay for hours charging at charging stations. Tristan can probably talk about the speeds at which the cars can charge at, say, some of the Chargepoint charging stations. But the range anxiety is more of simply learning a new way of being. It's not necessarily a technical problem the way it's presented in media.
Yeah, it's a psychology change when you're driving an EV, right? When you're driving gas, you fill up all at once, 0 to 100%. When you're driving an EV, it's more of a top-off model per se. So ideally, most of the charging you're doing at home, and then you drive 20 miles, you hit a charger for an hour, you regain that mileage, and then you drive home, or you continue driving to your next destination. So there's a little bit of planning to it, and it's a mindset shift. But yeah, you get used to that range anxiety.
And I would say with the home charging, if you're lucky enough to have that nice level 2 setup at home, which again, it's not necessary, but if you have it, you plug in overnight and you wake up in the morning with a full battery every day. It's really never happened to me that I've needed for my everyday driving around town and around the county, more than 200 miles. So generally 200 miles a day, goes a long way. And even with the, people considering a plug-in hybrid, do not underestimate the power of that little battery that may, in our Toyota Prius, it only holds 25 miles. And yet you plug it in overnight, we plug it into a regular outlet. This car sits in the driveway, gets plugged into an outdoor outlet. And then in the morning, that 25-mile battery is full. My son went back and forth to Westchester Community College all year long and used about 1 tank of gas every 6 months because 25 miles did what he needed it to do every day.
That's wonderful, Cynthia. If I may quickly add something more, I just want to give another example. My 85-year-old neighbor has a Chevy Bolt, which we bought during the pandemic. That's his only car now. And he recently, unfortunately, his wife passed away, and there was all of his family that were coming, and he had to go to the airport constantly to pick them up. So we drove from New Paltz to Newark Liberty International Airport, about 100 miles back forth in this cold weather. We made 4 trips in the last couple of weeks. We've not stopped once to charge. And that's essentially what Cynthia is saying. We start from home with 100% battery. The car has enough capacity. We go to the airport, we come back, we keep the heat on. We don't have to sacrifice that. And we drive home. Yeah, we're down to 5-10%, but it's beautiful. So we really are in a very different space now. And once we've hit these cars that have 250 miles of range, we're really going past that whole range anxiety issue.
Samrat, on that note, do you want to comment on, there's been a lot of news this week, in particular with the cold snap, how batteries and cars are faring in this cold weather?
So the batteries in any vehicle in the cold takes a performance hit. So gasoline vehicles take a performance hit as well. But we don't notice it because we don't follow it that closely, right? You just stop at the gas station, you fill up your car and you go. Also, in gasoline cars, heating comes from all that energy that is being wasted. So more than 70% of the energy in gasoline, more than 70% is wasted as heat. And that's why you need a radiator to cool the car engine. So in the winter, some of that is captured. Now, an EV is very efficient, doesn't waste anything, but that means that to heat the car, you need some from the battery. So primarily due to that, but other causes as well, you can get up to depending on temperatures. Right now, I think the range hit is about 20%. I'm keeping the heat on the car and everything. So 20 to 25% is average. This is, I'm going to put a link. You can look at winter EV range loss across different models. So one has to do some planning around that, but it's not a big thing. And I think I posted this article earlier, but I'm going to post it again. It's really being blown up out of proportion as always. And unfortunately, it's like news outlets like Fox News, whose journalists, I bet, do not drive electric cars. That somehow this cold snap up in Chicago has to do with Tesla's not being able to work in the cold. Some of the highest penetration of electric cars is in the Scandinavian countries. Norway, new electric car sales are like 95% of all new car sales are electric, right? So they're really at a different level. And when the Scandinavian data is being looked at, I've put it in the chat, electric cars, and this is extreme cold. We're not talking about this cold. This is nothing. Like 10, 15 is nothing. You're talking about extreme cold. Then their gasoline cars are twice as likely to fail than electric cars. So electric cars are twice as better than gasoline cars in extreme cold weather. That's some of the data that's coming out of Scandinavia.
Yeah, and just to add on to that really quickly, there's a great YouTube video online by a channel called State of Charge that did a really great video between the Rivian R1T and the Ford Lightning, where he left them on overnight with the heater to see how much power that burned off, right? And I believe it was around 10 to 15% leaving the car on all night with the heater on, to simulate you being stranded on the side of the highway, for example. You can't drive because you're snowed in essentially. But yeah, great video, and really gives you insight. If you want to learn about EVs, definitely look to the people that are driving them.
Right. And I quickly want to add to that now with a lot of the new EV models, they're putting heat pumps in the EVs for heating. Now, heat pumps are much more efficient than the age-old resistive heating. So like my previous car, like my first Tesla, had a resistive heating that takes more energy. The newer one has heat pumps, which is more efficient. And you're heating a very small space. So once you get it to the right temperature, there's not much energy to use. So it's really, again, a lot of these things are simply blown out of proportion because the fossil fuel industry keeps losing money. They keep losing customers, and they're unhappy about, despite the fact that they're one of the richest industries in the world.
Thank you. And all good info. Another question, what type of savings, financial and environmental, do EV owners experience? Cynthia, do you want to talk a little about what you've experienced as an owner?
Yeah, so just from my personal experience, I would say the cost that it takes for me to fuel my vehicle dropped by about half when we switched over from gas to pure EV. We have signed up through Sustainable Westchester for 100% renewable electricity supply, which costs a penny or two more per kilowatt hour than regular. So I feel good about, having all renewable energy powering my car. But, it's slightly more expensive than regular electricity. However, there's still savings over going to the gas station and filling up. So I used to fill up my tank of my old Honda Pilot before we got the Tesla, and now we're saving, I'd say, about half. My Honda Pilot probably got 20 miles per gallon, and the Tesla Model X is a 93 miles per gallon equivalent. So you kind of get a sense for how far you're going to go on what's the equivalent of a gallon of gas, which is great. 93 is amazing. What else about that savings? Save a lot on maintenance. We don't get oil changes. The only fluid in my car is the windshield wiper fluid. So I get to top that off once in a while and I'm done with the fluid in the car. So that's awesome. You don't have to worry about all of the moving parts of an engine. There's nothing to maintain with an engine that can, needs regular maintenance and needs repair. I think I even save on brakes because of the regenerative braking technology that the Tesla and electric, I think many electric vehicles have it. So when I take my foot off the accelerator, the car immediately begins to slow down because it's putting that energy, translating that forward momentum into energy that it puts back into the battery of the car. And so I automatically, begin to slow and therefore don't need to use the brakes as much. And once I got used to driving with the regenerative braking technology, I really decided I love it. So that's great. I don't need to replace the brakes as often. I probably do need to replace the tires a little more often just because this car that we have, the Model X, is a very heavy car. And so the tires we've had to replace slightly more often than we had to replace with our old vehicle that wasn't as heavy. So environmental savings, that's, different kind of savings, but, I love the fact that, we're not using fossil fuel because vehicles are an enormous, source of fossil fuel use in general. It's like one of the largest uses of fossil fuel overall around the world. So not using it feels good, and also not putting particulates into the air in terms of air pollution. Having zero emissions makes me feel really good. I was a pediatrician. I care about the air we breathe. I care about kids' health. I really, for it to be clean, and for me not to be polluting the air when I drive my car every day. I feel really good about that kind of savings too.
I just want to point out, in the town of Bedford, transportation emissions are 48% of the greenhouse gas emissions.
Wow.
So removing gasoline-powered, diesel-powered vehicles from the road does make a difference and will make a difference for the environment and for our health and the air we breathe. So great.
Right. And this is the report I'll just share with you, Ray, if you could please share with everyone, because I'm having trouble with that. The American Lung Association, again, these are doctors, like you're saying, Cynthia, like it's very clear, like even in the EU, the recommendation by doctors is very clear, like let's electrify transportation, because it's not just about greenhouse gas emissions, it's really about the way they pollute, and this pollution hurts people, the poorest people, the most, right? That's the greatest inequity, because anyone who has money likes to live away from the road. Like, who likes to live on a busy road? We know there are prices of property, right? The further you get away from a busy road, the more expensive the house is. Why is it? Noise pollution and air pollution, right? They damage our health. They limit the cognitive ability of our children's minds. So when we clean up the air, as a teacher, I'm excited, because as we clean up the air, it changes the ability of students, and my students in particular, to focus in class. So the data is very clear on this. It's just that it's not shared as widely.
And Samrat, do you have any comments on the savings that you get with an EV and the actual maintenance, et cetera, of the vehicle?
Yeah, I mean, so similar to what Cynthia said, I mean, in most cases, it's at least half up to a third, depending on the price of gas. Price of gas is low now. So you're saving about 50%, but when price of gas goes up to $4, you're talking about a third of that savings. Like Cynthia said, maybe you'll change your brakes once in the lifetime of the car, electric car. Nothing else. Like something like Tesla, they don't even want you to come for service. Like Tesla doesn't like to service people because they're like, we just rather sell you the car. And that's why so many dealerships, they hate electric cars, because when you go there, there's nothing to service, right? So what are you going to replace the 12-volt battery after? The smaller battery, not the big battery does not require replacement, folks. The 12-volt battery you're going to replace after 3-4 years. So that's about it. And then the usual, the stuff that happens in a gas car, tires, etc.
Thank you.
In my family, if I may quickly, sorry, between our two cars, when we have two all electrics, we save about $2,000 every year. That's our savings from switching to gas, right? Which means in 10 years, the Nissan Leaf will be free. So it's basically like saying, I went to buy a Tesla and somebody said, hey, you want a Nissan Leaf for free? Like, sure, give it to me. Right? That's what we're talking about. Those are the numbers.
Thank you. I wanted to touch on, are electric cars actually better for the environment, and bring up the lithium batteries, lithium mining, recycling batteries? How does that all come into play?
Sure. Can I take that?
Yes.
Okay. So I shared this one. Please share with everyone. This is the EV emissions tool. Folks, please play with it. This is one is from our favorite Bedford 2030, and one is from the Union of Concerned Scientists. Please play with that. You'll see how much cleaner electric cars are compared to gasoline cars on a day-to-day basis. It's staggering. The numbers are staggering. If this is a whole conversation that I'm trying to compress into 2 minutes. So if you still feel like very strongly that electric cars are not better environmentally, I really recommend that the coaching link that I shared earlier, please contact me. This is free service. Happy to talk you through to a 2-hour presentation. But here's the short summary. On a day-to-day basis, running electric cars, no matter where you are in the country, does not matter where you are. You can look at that map. EVs are better to run, especially in our area. The electricity is very clean. In New Paltz, if I drive a Tesla, I don't pair it with renewable energy. Even if I don't pair it, then the pollution from the electricity would be as if my car is giving me 300 miles to the gallon, right? That's how low it is, which means my pollution reduction is about 85 to 90% compared to some other car, the average car on the road. So that's one thing. Then the question is on batteries, right? Clearly, driving EVs means cleaner air for people around. What about the batteries? One can look at it in three different ways. One, batteries are not thrown away. This language is used a lot. Somebody put it in the chat as well. Discarded. No, they're not discarded. They're very valuable resource. So the first thing that is starting to happen is a lot of the used EV the batteries that were in cars, they will have a second life. We'll share a link. You can see companies like B2U, B2OU, they are starting to use car EV batteries for storage along with renewables. So that's going to extend the usable life of EV batteries. Then we're starting to see, like in the EU, this hasn't quite happened in the US yet, but mandates are coming that EV batteries will have to be recycled, right? So they will have to be recycled, no choice. Just like with your lead acid batteries, right? They have to be recycled. Well, lithium ion, same thing. Then in order to meet those mandates, we're starting to see companies across the world starting to recycling companies starting to grow. And I've shared a couple of examples from the US. These are newer companies. And I don't give investment advice, but if you really wanted to, these are good companies to invest in. They will only grow, right? I haven't invested in them. And one more thing I want to mention, Mariah, is that I think people talk lithium ion all the time. They don't realize that lithium ion batteries have many different chemistries. So say the newest Tesla that I got, there's a lot of conversation around cobalt, which is an important conversation. The newer Tesla that I got doesn't have cobalt in it. it's gone. Like it's not there in the lowest model. So the battery chemistries keep changing. And what is exciting is that sodium ion batteries are starting to come onto the market. And this is the two biggest battery manufacturers in the world, CATL and BYD. We're going to share a very nice article. Please go through that. As sodium ion does not need lithium. Sodium is widely available, less environmental impact. So this is something that is being constantly looked at, worked upon. We need to keep asking these questions, but none of these questions mean that we don't have to buy electric cars, because the option is fossil fuel cars, and we know how much damage they cause to both the environment and our health.
Thank you. That was very helpful and informative answer. And I put a lot of the links that Samrat mentioned into the chat. So please feel free to download the chat and reference those. Any thoughts from it? This is open on buying or leasing a car. I know there's some conversations that you shouldn't buy it yet. You should wait and lease it because the range is changing, etc.
It's really just personal preference, right? I think we would all agree with that. It really depends on what's best for you financially, what kind of vehicle you're looking for. It is an exciting time to look at new vehicles, in which case leasing can be a great way to always, try the new thing, have one car for 3 years and then upgrade to another one and, continue a similar payment. It's very personal picking a car and, how to finance it. So.
Right. As a coach, my always advice is like, Tristan, like you said, yeah, that's a very personal thing, but in 3 years, nothing really changes. Like the 2019 Model 3 that I had versus the 2023 Model 3, the difference is the charging pad in the car. It went from a wired charging pad to a wireless charging pad, right? The underlying technology didn't really change. It's sort of, again, that thing we feel very uncomfortable about. So again, talk to somebody who's had a car for a while, look at their car, and then compare it to the new car and see how different they are. Well, if they aren't that different, then in the next 3 years, nothing groundbreaking is going to happen. So like even I mentioned sodium ion batteries, they're not going to be there in the next 3 years. Yes, next 7 years maybe. So one shouldn't wait too much, because like we've been discussing, you're losing out on the savings. The savings are there to be had, and every year that you wait, you lose out on both the environmental and the financial savings.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think just one more thing to add. I think it's just important to take note that, the early adopters are going to get the best savings. So the most incentives are going to be happening, right now in the next few years as EVs are starting to ramp up. Once they're more generally adopted, we're going to see these incentives slowly kind of drop off.
Thank you. I have another charging question for you, Tristan, or if anyone else wants to chime in. What about if you live in an apartment building or you're a tenant? What do you recommend doing in those situations?
Yeah, so apartments, condos, there are charging options for them. You can work with your landlord and get a charger installed. There's deeded charger options if you have a designated parking spot, in which case, it goes in your parking spot or your garage if you have one, and you have a home charger in that case. Other cases, there are public chargers at apartment complexes used to, attract tenants, and then that's an amenity for the tenants as well. And then, if you don't have a charger at the apartment, at the condo, superchargers, knowing where your fast chargers are at. I work with a consultant who helps me with my deals. He drives a Tesla. He lives in an apartment. He's never had a home charger. He's been driving his Tesla since 2012. He's been charging exclusively on fast chargers, and he's been living his life happily that way. I think he told me it's about 13% battery degradation that he's seen over time. I know that's a concern with people talking about only using DC fast chargers. Again, that's more it's more news to kind of scare you away from it. The battery degradation so far, from what I've heard from him and my other customers, that it's not as extreme as people make it out to be.
The other option in New York, there are programs available if the charger will be public. So if you do live in an apartment building and your landlord might be interested, there's pretty significant financial incentives to help landlords install chargers that would be publicly available. So we've gone through my questions. We've had a bunch of questions come in. So I'm just going to start running through those. And if you'd like to actually speak, feel free to raise your hand and we can promote you as well to ask your question live, or you can ask it in the chat.
Mariah, sorry, quickly. I've answered a bunch of them in the chat. Are they visible to everyone?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yep.
But I can answer more, yeah.
Someone brought up fires, the battery fires, and how big of a concern should that be? Tristan, I don't know if you have thoughts.
Yeah, it's it's a non-issue, really, in my opinion. And Samrat, maybe you have thoughts on it as well. But I've seen data that it's like a 0.12% chance that your EV battery catches fire compared to like a 0.1% chance with your gasoline car. So
right,
there was a couple fires very early on when the cars were being first released. I haven't seen any of it since then.
And I think it's that the cognitive bias that we all have, which is the availability heuristic, right? Oh, I heard it on the news, there was an EV battery fire, right? Yes, but how many EVs are on the road? Millions of them, right? But we don't hear about gasoline car fires anymore because they blow up every day. So like Tristan is saying, right? So we've shared the article. Please go through that. This is again data coming from countries that have high rate of, I think this might be Swedish data if I remember correctly, that have high rates of EV adoption. What they've noticed is as the number of EVs on the roads have increased, the number of battery fires haven't, which means the cars are getting safer. And I think it's about 20 times the difference, that your EV is 20 times less likely to catch fire than your gas car. But it's just, again, it becomes that thing on the news cycle, which your Uncle Bob will share on social media endlessly because he has an axe to grind. By the way, but I quickly wanted to say this because somebody mentioned there that there's something that I want to kill fossil fuels. I do want to, full disclosure, my father worked in the fossil fuel industry all his life. He retired from the Indian Oil Corporation. He was a chemist there. All of my education has been paid with fossil fuel money. My brother manages the largest power plant in Delhi, right? It's a fracked gas power plant. I have nothing personal against fossil fuels. It's just that the data is so strong in terms of where we need to be as far as our environmental goals are concerned and as far as public health goals, that I can't have any bias. I have to push. We all have to push against this stuff. There's no agenda here.
Thank you. There was a question about the resale value on EV cars. Do they lose more value than gas or hybrids?
I think they do. Yeah, Tristan, go ahead.
I was gonna say I've seen them holding their value a lot stronger than you would see gas cars.
Right. I think it depends because sometimes what plays is the fact that the tax credit that comes on them it distorts the value of the used. So it goes both ways, right? You get a tax credit up front, which actually makes the car cheaper for you. So then if the resale value is lower, that's just simply a function of that. So it's not like Tristan is saying the cars hold their value well. It's just that they might seem low compared to the MSRP because we're taking the tax credit into account.
Thank you. Another question, can batteries that have been degraded be upgraded?
So here's a quick answer, right? And please, if everyone else, please feel free to jump in because I feel like I'm talking too much. But you really wouldn't want to do that. Right, so a lot of this happened early on because the early Nissan Leafs, and this is a problem with Nissan and not with electric cars. Nissan made the Leafs without battery thermal management. A lot of these cars were driven in warm climates that in places like Arizona, it damaged batteries. So people said EV batteries, they don't last a long time. Not true. That was a Nissan problem. EV batteries I am fairly confident the data is showing that EV batteries in all these cars that we're talking about, and that those will be eligible for the federal tax credits, they will easily last 200,000 miles. There will be some degradation, 5, 10, maybe 15%, but you have to think about it, right? You've driven a car 200,000 miles. It used to give you 250 miles of range. Even if there's 20% degradation after 200,000 miles, it still is a 200-mile EV. That's a lot of range, right? So in the Northeast, the bodies of these cars will fall apart because of our salty roads in the winter before the batteries need to be changed. So you wouldn't want to upgrade them necessarily. That's where the second life comes into play. They'll be used as backup storage for renewable energy. That's a better use for them.
Thank you. Let's see what else. There have been a couple questions about the degradation of batteries over time. I don't know, Cynthia, have you experienced that in your EV ownership? And if anyone else wants to comment?
I have not experienced it in the 5 years that I've been driving my EV. It still will hold a 220-mile charge. And so I haven't experienced it yet. I can't really speak to it in addition to that.
Yeah, that's right. I have similar numbers. Like I had driven 70,000 miles on my Tesla, and I think about 3-4% degradation. And I know the degradation is the data that's been done on cars that have been driven 400-500,000 miles, that the degradation happens early on a little bit faster, and then it just plateaus. So it's, again, not something to worry about. By the way, can I quickly, Maria, can I take this question that Richard is raising? Richard is raising great questions in the chat. I just think
Sure.
Richard is a little skeptical of our efforts here. And Richard, I do appreciate the fact that you're asking tough questions, because those are exactly the questions we did not ask when we built a world based on fossil fuels, right? And we know the result now. So I'm very glad that you're asking those questions. I think when we talk about electrification, I think to shift to the global perspective is incorrect in this case, because we're not saying that every single country in the world people need to drive Teslas. I am not claiming that. I'm saying Americans who have money, who drive big cars, who drive a lot, they need to specifically electrify their transportation, because when you look at the US numbers, the US greenhouse gas emissions by sector, then transportation is 29% of our emissions. It is the thing we cannot solve the climate crisis without in the US. So it's the biggest chunk of our emissions. So that would be like shifting goalposts, like, oh, let's talk about the poor African countries because they don't have emissions. So that brings down our total global emissions while the Americans keep driving their big cars. I think that's a little bit of an apples to orange comparison, Richard.
Thank you, Samrat. Another question. Do you see the battery range increasing in the future? And what is that in the next couple months, couple years?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. That's the goal, right? The goal is to get that range up as high as possible using as little power as possible, making them as efficient as possible. I think we saw Toyota make an announcement that their vehicles coming up will have 700 miles of range. So that's the kind of stuff we're going to start seeing over the next 10 years. Like I said earlier, it's a very exciting industry to, get to watch grow. And I think it's important too to consider, how much you drive per day and how much the average American drives per day, right? It's typically under 40 miles a day. So in a lot of cases, 200 miles of range is perfectly fine to get you through your day-to-day life. And then, you go on a road trip here and there, you plan out your route, make sure you hit some chargers. That works great too. There's going to be a future where you're going to have to charge less on those road trips, but right now that's what you're looking at, and it still works just fine. So
that's right, Tristan. And I think I'd add to that by saying that I think one should, again, buy only the car that one needs. We have one Tesla because we need to be on the road sometimes, right? Which means I might need to drive 6 hours. So that's why we have a Tesla. But we don't need 2 Teslas in the family. That'd be spending more money than I have to. So then we have a smaller all electric that is perfect for going up to, say, Albany and back. That only has a 150-mile range. So why carry more battery than you have to? So yes, battery density, energy density has been increasing. And like Tristan said, it's going to keep increasing, which is very exciting. But why spend more money than you have to is basically how I look at it. Only get the battery that you need.
Thank you, that's helpful. And speaking from experience about range and charging and trips, I have 2 small children, so every single stop that we make on the highway is at least 20 to 30 minutes. So it really affects me zero, the charging. So for anyone with little kids considering it, it's not an issue, the stops on the highway.
Yeah. And if you bring your dog along, your dog needs to get out of the car and walk, and get some fresh air. So it's good for dogs too.
But I know Tesla has a built-in navigation system. What are the other charging or ways that you charge on the go or locate chargers?
Yeah, so of course there's the Chargepoint app, that loops in other roaming partners as well, other vendors, other different charger manufacturers. And there's third parties like PlugShare, ChargeWay. A lot of these apps, Chargepoint included, are being built into the vehicle's dash at this point. So, it's super easy to plan your trip through your car or through your phone. Yeah, there's lots of options out there to navigate and plan your trips.
Does anyone have any thoughts or information on the charging stations in Northern Westchester or future build outs?
I mean, I can't really speak specifically to that location, but there's a lot of grants floating around out there for cities and towns to build up their charging network for the citizens. So as long as these cities are on top of it and they're applying for these funds, a lot of this infrastructure is going to be covered.
And
So
Tristan,
you
is that something you'd say that this is the kind of thing that I'd like to throw back at people, right? Because there's also a personal responsibility we have to take to create the world we live in, right? It's not easy to point like, why doesn't ChargePoint put a station in my town? But there's room for us to, as citizens, to get together and contact ChargePoint, right? Given the incentives that are available to do this work, right?
Exactly, yeah. And then I think it's important to note as well, there's companies like ChargePoint where, primarily we sell to businesses, and then the businesses are towns, municipalities. They offer the charging, and they set pricing. They completely own and control those stations. And there's other charging manufacturers, Electrify America, for example, that will just plop chargers down and collect the funds from the energy being generated. So there's different companies doing different things, but everyone's trying to accomplish the same goal of getting chargers in the ground and supporting the adoption of EVs.
The town of Bedford recently installed 2 new chargers in commuter lots, and they combine NYSEG grants with a DEC grant to install ChargePoint chargers. And the town itself didn't have to outlay that much money for the chargers because of the grants available, which is exciting. And the town of Bedford this summer, working with NIPA is going to be installing fast chargers along the 684 corridor. So Bedford's actually I think it's 6 new fast chargers are coming to town, which is super exciting.
Yeah, and you see the automakers hopping on that bandwagon as well, adding more like fast charger depots out there. Mercedes in particular just started their launch of their fast charger program with our fast chargers. Those are going to be popping up all around. They're like very cool little gas station kind of environments. There's a little office where you can go hang out, get a snack, do some work while you're charging, go hop back in your vehicle. And, it's not just Mercedes out there. I forget what the group's called, but it's about 7 or 8 of the top auto manufacturers working on building their own network as well. So there's a lot of that infrastructure being built and coming very soon. So
I know, Cynthia, you commented on how wide the Tesla network is, and I've heard rumors about Tesla potentially opening up their charging network. Do any of you have any comments or thoughts on, is that really happening? Is it happening in the near distant future?
should be this
Yeah.
year, right?
Yeah, it's
They're supposed to
happening.
be opening up.
Yeah, it's already started happening. They've already done it at a few stations. So part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, there was an allotment of about $7.5 billion towards EV charging, fast EV charging across the country. And the stipulation was that whoever qualifies for the funds has to offer charging to more than one kind of automaker. Like, you can't be just like, oh, this is only for our cars and nobody else. So Tesla has started opening up their stations with the CCS SAE combo that Tristan was saying. They've started putting, it's like a new dock that they've put into their fast chargers. But like Tristan said, Tesla's standard, the NACS, is being adopted by auto manufacturers across the board now. So by 2025, which is next year already, GMs and Fords and all of these cars will start coming out with the Tesla adapter. So you're like, this is, game's on, and you can already download Tesla's app, and you don't need to own a Tesla, and you can use it as a third-party person to charge at a place where this facility is available. So yeah, this is going to open up very quickly within a year or two.
So to use the chargers now, it's not an adapter that you purchase right now. You can only go to a Tesla charger that has been made available.
You can purchase adapters.
You can purchase an adapter now.
Yes, yeah. In the level 2 adapters, I think they're maybe $50. You can get them on Amazon,
right.
Roughly around there.
But the level 3 is what I think Maria is saying, right? You mean like for fast charging, right? Yeah, because that has to be, because they have the special dock that plugs into, say, a Bolt, and then you need to have the app. So I have a Tesla, so I haven't tried that out, and I have a Leaf, so that doesn't work with that. So I don't know.
So
but I think
Tesla's... Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say Teslas do have a level 3 adapter. It's a CHAdeMO to NACS. That's how they can get into those level 3 chargers.
Right, but it's just not worth it. So
yeah.
For me, like for us, it's the perfect second car, and and that's the thing I was talking about earlier as well, right? Like, there's just different uses for different cars.
We have one more question. You mentioned degraded batteries are used for storage rather than being regraded. What kind of storage are you referring to?
So storage there means storage for renewables. So I'll post this link again, because I think it's really fun to look at this stuff, and maybe I'm just very nerdy this ways. But I actually enjoy, like, people, wow, that's great. You didn't have to mine anything. A car had a crash. You got the batteries out of it, and now you are trading electricity with that and putting more renewables into the grid. So this is just one example, Charlotte. Like, what basically is happening is used EV batteries are being used as backup systems. So when the sun is shining, the wind is blowing, you store that energy, and in times of low power, then when energy is not available, or more energy is necessary, more power is necessary, you send it out into the grid. And there are many examples of this. Nissan has done this with Leaf batteries in Japan, in Amsterdam, and Holland. This has been done for one of their biggest soccer stadiums. There are BMW, I think, did it at their facility in Germany somewhere. Examples are all over the place. So yes, exactly, for solar. So you'd get the excess solar, put it in the battery, use it when you have a requirement. Or it could be wind as well. It would work with any source.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any questions? We've gone through everything that's come in. This has been very informative, super informative for me, and I feel like I work on transportation all the time. So I learned a few things today, and I'm very appreciative of all 3 of your perspectives and insight and answering all of our questions. Again, I want to thank the 3 panelists. I want to thank North Salem Climate Action Committee, New Yorkers for Clean Power. And I also wanted to let everyone know Bedford 2030 released a tool called EV 2030, where if you live in Bedford, you can put in your VIN number and you can check the emissions of your vehicle. And right now we have a contest that you can win a $100 gift card. Yep. And there, I just put the form in the chat that you fill out. And if you fill out the form, the drawing's on February 1st. I think that's all for this evening. Thank you guys, and I'll put my email in here if you have any questions and want to follow up. And we also will be recording the webinar, and we will post that on our website.
And like I said earlier, and I think I've put this twice in the chat, the New Yorkers for Clean Power, our clean energy coaching is really free for everyone. Please just make an appointment with any of us. Like, we can talk your ears off, right? We all of us coaches like talking, and we need more coaches too. Like, that's a question. If you really feel passionately, you have some time and you have expertise, and you say like, hey, I want to be a coach, maybe there's a conversation to be had there.
We also have a coaching, Bedford 2030 has an energy coaching too with a coach that lives in Bedford. So if there's coaches galore, and we'd love everyone to sign up and make that transition to electric.
Mariah, can I quickly answer that question about solar panel recycling?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen because I want to show you an infographic here, right? I want to put the waste in perspective. So there's a lot of information here, but I'll focus your attention. This is municipal waste that we create. Like this, the biggest, this is like the gray chunk is municipal waste. And you can see it by the year. The year is along this axis. So this is by the year 2050, how much cumulative municipal waste we'll create. Compare that to use of coal in this country, and even as we phase out coal, you can see how much coal ash we'll use and create. Plastic waste. Look at the size of that plastic waste. Blue is the e-waste, the waste from all our electronic stuff, our new iPhones every 2 years. Now compare that to this little orange thing, which is the waste from photovoltaics. Now, best case scenario is that we recycle about 2/3 of them, right? So in the best case scenario, it's that little thing over there. In the worst case scenario, it's that little pink thing in the back. Even in the worst case scenario, it is much, much smaller than all this other avoidable waste, the municipal waste, the coal ash, the plastic waste, the e-waste. Now that I've given you a sense, hopefully that gives you a sense of how much less it is and how overblown it is. Having said that, yes, solar panel, that's a piece that's really been worked on hard, because the main problem with recycling solar panels is that its cost effectiveness. About 75% of a solar panel is just glass. So how do you recycle that so that you actually bring it's valuable to recycle? But that's what's being worked on, and I can always share more data on that, like again, if you talk about it in a private session.
Thank you, Samrat. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Stay warm. I hope you all have good insulation in your homes, and stay warm. And if you have more questions, feel free to email us and reach out. Thank you very much for joining. Good night, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Take care.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks,
Thanks,
Mariah.
Cynthia. Bye, Tristan. Thank you. Thank
Bye,
you both.
Samrat.
Thank Mariah.
Bye, Tristan.